Tonight was supposed to be the end. Lady Michael Vance had not come to the grand Ashbourne ball to dance. She had come to say goodbye. Underneath the emerald silk of her gown, her heart was beating a countdown. She had no dowry, her family was ruined, and a cruel, debt-holding monster was waiting to claim her as payment at midnight. She had resolved that this would be her final night in society before she vanished into the London fog forever. But destiny is rarely so quiet. She didn't know that across the ballroom, the most dangerous man in England, a duke known only for his cold brutality, was watching her. And she certainly didn't know that a single kiss on her hand would not only shatter her plans, but rewrite history itself. This is the story of how a woman on the edge of ruin tamed the wolf. The mirror in the dressing room of Vance House was cracked. It was a hairline fracture, running diagonally across the glass, effectively slicing Lady Michael Vance's reflection in two. It was fitting, she thought. The woman she appeared to be, the pristine, high-born daughter of a baron, was barely holding together the woman she actually was. A terrified girl standing on the precipice of total ruin. "Hold your breath, my lady," the maid, profound sadness in her eyes, whispered. Michael gripped the bedpost, her knuckles turning white as the corset laces were pulled tight. The air left her lungs, replaced by the familiar, rigid embrace of whalebone and stiff fabric. This dress, a deep, shimmering emerald green silk sourced from a boutique on Bond Street 3 years ago, was the last thing of value she owned. They had darned a tear in the hem with such precision that not even the sharpest-eyed dowager would notice. "It fits perfectly," the maid lied gently. "It fits like a cage, Martha," Michael replied, her voice hollow. Outside the window, the grey London sky was weeping rain against the glass. It was November 1887. To the outside world, the season was over. But the little season was in full swing, and tonight was the Duchess of Ashbourne's masquerade, though masks were optional. For Michael, it wasn't a party. It was a funeral service for her life. Her father, Baron Vance, was currently in his study downstairs, likely staring into the bottom of a brandy glass. The Baron was a good man with a fatal flaw. He believed in luck. He believed in it so fervently that he had gambled away the Vance fortune, the estate in warmth of Sussex, and finally, the London townhouse they currently stood in. 2 days ago, the hammer had fallen. Lord Reginald Halloway, a man of 60, with hands that felt like damp parchment and eyes that stripped women bare, had purchased their debt. He had come to the house, reeking of cigar smoke and entitlement, and made the offer. He would forgive the debt, all £50,000 of it, if Michael became the third Lady Halloway. The first 2 wives had died under mysterious circumstances involving falls and sudden illnesses. Michael had no intention of being the third. She touched the cold glass of the perfume bottle, rose water, diluted to make it last. She had a plan. Tonight, she would attend the ball to keep up appearances. She would dance until her feet bled. And then, when the carriages were called, she would not return home. She had sewn 10 sovereigns into the lining of her cloak, money she had saved by selling her mother's silver hairbrush. She would go to the docks. She would take a ship to America or France, or simply disappear into the rookeries of the East End. Anything was better than Halloway's bed. "Your father is waiting," Martha said, handing Michael her gloves. The gloves were white kidskin, scrubbed clean of stains with breadcrumbs and milk. Michael turned from the cracked mirror. She held her head high, the emerald silk rustling with a sound that was remarkably like a whisper of warning. "Let us go, Martha. If this is to be my last night as a lady, I intend to make sure they remember the dress, if not the woman inside it." She walked down the stairs, the heavy wood creaking under her feet. Her father looked up, his eyes bloodshot. He didn't see his daughter. He saw a currency exchange. "You look expensive, Michael," he muttered, his voice slurred. "Halloway will be pleased." "Halloway can rot in hell, father," she said softly, brushing past him. She stepped out into the carriage, a hired hackney, not their own, and the smell of wet cobblestones hit her. The city felt like a beast waiting to swallow her whole. She didn't know it yet. But the beast wasn't the city. The beast was waiting in the ballroom. The Ashbourne ballroom was a cavern of gold leaf and crystal. 300 candles burned in the chandeliers, heating the air until it smelled of melting wax and expensive French perfume. The orchestra was playing a Strauss waltz, the rhythm infectious and dizzying. Michael stood on the edge of the dance floor, her emerald dress vibrant against the sea of pastels and whites favored by the debutantes. She held her fan like a weapon. She could hear the whispers already. London society was a small, vicious ecosystem. They could smell blood in the water. "Is that the Vance girl? I heard her father lost the last of the horses at Tattersall's yesterday. Look at the hem of her gown. Isn't that the same one she wore to the opera in June? They say Halloway has bought the deed to their house. Poor creature." Michael kept her chin parallel to the floor, fixing a frozen smile on her face. Let them talk, she thought. By morning, I will be a ghost to them. "Lady Michael." The voice was like oil sliding over gravel. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. The hairs on her arms stood up. Lord Halloway stepped into her line of sight. He was a thick-set man, his neck spilling over his stiff collar. He wore a waistcoat that strained against his stomach, and his eyes, watery and pale blue, dropped immediately to her bodice. "Lord Halloway," she said, dipping into a curtsy that was technically correct, but entirely devoid of respect. "You look ravishing, my dear," he said, moving too close. He smelled of stale port and peppermint, used to mask the alcohol. "Green, the colour of money or envy. Which is it tonight?" "It's the colour of nature, my lord. Something wild that cannot be tamed," Michael replied sharply. Halloway laughed, a wet, wheezing sound. "Everything can be tamed, Michael. Horses, dogs, women. It simply requires the right leverage. Your father tells me we are to announce our engagement tonight." Michael's blood ran cold. That was not the agreement. "I have until the end of the month to decide." "The month ends in spirit tonight," Halloway sneered, his mask of politeness slipping. He reached out and grabbed her wrist. His fingers were surprisingly strong, digging into her flesh through the kidskin glove. "I am tired of waiting. You are damaged goods, Michael. Your family is a laughingstock. I am doing you a charity. You will dance this waltz with me, and then we will go to the balcony and announce it." "Let go of me," she hissed, trying to pull her hand back without causing a scene. "No," Halloway grinned, showing yellowed teeth. "You belong to me. The receipts are in my pocket." Panic, sharp and blinding, flared in her chest. This wasn't the plan. She couldn't run if he announced it. The shame would follow her. The legal bind would tighten. She looked around the room. People saw. They saw the grip, the distress, and they looked away. No one intervened in the affairs of men and their property. "I said," Halloway growled, "dance." And she said, a new voice cut through the air, deep, resonant, and terrifyingly calm, "Let go." The temperature in the immediate vicinity seemed to drop 10 degrees. Halloway froze. Michael looked up. Standing behind Halloway was a man who looked like he had been carved out of shadows. He was tall, towering over the other guests. He wore black, stark, unadorned black evening wear that fit his broad shoulders with military precision. His hair was dark, swept back from a face that was devastatingly handsome, but marred by an expression of utter, bored ruthlessness. But it was his eyes that stopped Michael's breath. They were grey, the colour of a storm at sea, and they were currently fixed on Holloway's hand with the intensity of a predator watching a rabbit. The music didn't stop, but the silence rippled outward from them in a wave. "Your Grace," Holloway stammered, his grip on Michael loosening instantly. He looked terrified. "Lord Holloway," the stranger said. His voice was smooth, cultured, but carried an undercurrent of violence. "I believe the lady declined your offer, and I believe you are touching her without permission." We are practically betrothed," Holloway spluttered, backing away. "Practically is a word used by men who fail," the stranger said. He didn't look at Holloway. He looked at Michael. He extended a hand. It was large, gloved in black. "I believe this waltz is mine." Michael didn't know him, but she knew of him. Everyone did. Sebastian Thorne, the Duke of Blackwood. They called him the Wolf of the North. He was rumoured to be richer than the Queen and twice as cold. He rarely came to London. He had not attended a ball in 5 years, not since his brother died in a duel that rumours said Sebastian had arranged. He was a man who destroyed companies and ruined reputations for sport, and he was offering her a way out. Michael looked at Holloway, sweating and fearful. Then she looked at the Duke's open hand. It was a choice between a butcher and a wolf. She placed her hand in the Duke's. "It would be my honour, Your Grace," she whispered. As Sebastian led her onto the floor, the crowd parted. It wasn't the polite parting of society. It was the parting of the Red Sea. They were terrified of him. He turned her into the frame of the waltz. His hand on her waist was firm, authoritative. But unlike Holloway's clammy grip, this felt steady. It felt like iron wrapped in velvet. They began to move. He danced with an elegance that belied his size, sweeping her across the floor with a power that made her light-headed. "You are shaking, Lady Michael," Sebastian said. He wasn't looking at the crowd. He was looking down at her, analysing her face. "I am angry, Your Grace," she corrected, lifting her chin. "There is a difference." A flicker of something, amusement, crossed his stoic face. "Is that so? Most women in your position would be weeping. Holloway is a toad, but he is a rich toad. And your father? Well, let us say the Baron has been very vocal about his financial distress at the alluring tables of the St. James Club." Michael stiffened. "You know my father?" "I own the club where your father lost your dowry," Sebastian said flatly. Michael missed a step. Sebastian corrected her effortlessly, lifting her so her feet barely touched the ground. "So you are here to gloat?" Michael asked, her voice trembling with a mix of shame and fury. "To inspect the wreckage?" "I am here," Sebastian said, spinning her past a group of gossiping countesses, "because I require something, and I detest waste. Seeing a woman of your fire being sold to a man like Holloway is a waste." "I am not being sold," she snapped. "I am leaving. Tonight." Sebastian's eyes narrowed. "Leaving? Running away? Escaping. With what money?" he asked brutally. "I saw you arrive in a hackney carriage. Your dress is 3 years old. Exquisite, but old. You have perhaps £10 to your name. Where will you go? The docks? You'll be dead or in a brothel within a week." Michael gasped. The cruelty of his truth stung worse than a slap. "How dare you?" "I dare because I know the world, Michael, better than you do." He pulled her slightly closer. The heat radiating from him was intoxicating. "You have spirit, but spirit doesn't pay debts. Holloway holds a promissory note for £50,000. He intends to cash it in tomorrow morning if you do not marry him. Your father will be in debtor's prison by noon. You will be on the street." Michael felt the tears prickling her eyes. She fought them back. She would not cry in front of the wolf. "Why are you telling me this?" The music swelled to a crescendo. They stopped in the center of the room. Every eye was on them. Sebastian didn't release her hand. Instead, he did something that would be talked about in London for the next century. He lifted her gloved hand to his lips. He didn't just brush his knuckles. He pressed his mouth firmly against the back of her hand, his eyes locking with hers over her fingers. It was an intimate, possessive, shocking gesture. "I am telling you this," he murmured against her skin, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "because I have a proposition. I will pay your father's debt, all of it. I will crush Holloway into dust." Michael's heart hammered against her ribs. "And what do you want in return, Your Grace?" "My soul." Sebastian straightened, towering over her. His expression was unreadable, dangerous, and utterly captivating. "I need a wife," he said softly. "But not a real one. I need a shield. I need a woman who can act the part of a duchess to keep the vultures away from my estate, but who leaves me alone in private. I need a business partner, Michael. Marry me, give me 1 year, and I will give you the world." The music ended. The silence returned. "Meet me in the East Garden in 10 minutes, he said, releasing her hand. "Do not be late. I do not wait for anyone." He turned and walked away, leaving Michael standing alone in the center of the ballroom, her skin burning where his lips had touched her, the offer hanging in the air like a guillotine blade. Run and die? Or stay and marry the wolf? She looked at Holloway, who was glaring at her from the sidelines. Then she looked at the broad back of the Duke disappearing through the French doors. She gathered her emerald skirts. She was not a coward. She headed for the garden. The East Garden was a labyrinth of manicured hedges and stone statues, shrouded in the damp fog that had rolled in off the Thames. The noise of the ball faded into a dull roar behind Michael as she stepped onto the gravel path. Her heart was beating so hard she felt dizzy. Sebastian Thorne was waiting for her by a fountain depicting Neptune. He had lit a cheroot, the cherry-red ember glowing in the darkness. He looked even larger here, out in the elements, than he had in the ballroom. He looked like part of the storm. "You came," he said, not turning around. He exhaled a plume of smoke that vanished into the mist. "You left me little choice," Michael replied, wrapping her arms around herself to ward off the chill. "It was either you or the precipice." He turned then, dropping the cheroot and crushing it beneath his boot. "There is always a choice, Lady Michael. You could have run. You could have married Holloway. You chose the unknown. That speaks to your courage, or your foolishness." "Perhaps they are the same thing tonight," she countered. "Tell me the terms. Explicitly." Sebastian stepped into the moonlight. His face was stark, the angles sharp. "It is simple. My cousin, Lord Julian Thorne, is currently petitioning the House of Lords to have me declared mentally unfit to hold my title. He claims my solitude, since my brother's death is a sign of madness, the same madness that took my father." Michael gasped softly. The Mad Duke rumor. She had heard it, but she had never connected it to the man standing before her, who seemed composed of nothing but steel and logic. "If I am unmarried and without an heir, or at least the prospect of one, by my 30th birthday, which is in 2 months, Julian has a strong case to seize control of the Blackwood estates," Sebastian continued, his voice devoid of emotion. "I need a wife to prove stability. I need a hostess to fill my house with life, to smile at the right people, and to silence the whispers. I do not want love. I do not want affection. I want a performance. And in return, Michael asked, I will settle your father's debts tonight. I will settle a trust in your name for £20,000 that is yours alone, untouchable by me or your father. And after 1 year, if we have convinced the lords, we will live separate lives. You may reside in the dower house, travel to Paris, do whatever you wish. You will be a duchess in name, wealthy and free. It was the perfect deal. It was a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. And yet, Michael felt a strange pang in her chest. And marital duties? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. She forced herself to meet his gaze. Sebastian's eyes darkened. He stepped closer, invading her space, until she could smell the tobacco and sandalwood on his coat. He looked down at her, his expression unreadable. I will not touch you, Michael. Not unless you ask me to, he said, his voice dropping an octave. I am not Holloway. I do not take what is not freely given. Our marriage will be on paper. You will be safe from me. Safe. The word hung between them. Do we have an accord? He asked, extending his hand again. Michael looked at the hand. It was the hand that could crush her or save her. She thought of Holloway's sweaty grip. She thought of her father's pathetic, hopeful eyes. We have an accord, Your Grace, she said. She placed her hand in his. This time he didn't kiss it. He gripped it firmly, like a business partner. Good, he said. Now take my arm. We have a vulture to disappoint. They walked back into the ballroom, arm in arm. The moment they crossed the threshold, Sebastian's demeanor changed. He wasn't the cold businessman anymore. He was the protective, possessive aristocrat. He pulled her slightly closer, his hand resting possessively on her gloved forearm. Holloway was waiting near the punch bowl, holding court with a group of men, laughing loudly. When he saw them, his laughter died. Sebastian walked straight up to him. The music seemed to quieten as the room sensed a confrontation. Lord Holloway, Sebastian said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the room. Your Grace, Holloway sneered, though his eyes darted nervously to Michael. I see you have returned, the lady. I was just telling these gentlemen about the announcement Lady Michael and I are to make. There will be no announcement from you, Sebastian said smoothly. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a checkbook. He didn't ask for a pen. He simply stared at Holloway. The debt is 50,000, is it not? The debt is not for sale, Holloway stammered. It is a matter of honor. It is a matter of money, Sebastian corrected. And I am buying it. You cannot simply, I am the Duke of Blackwood, Sebastian cut him off, his voice like a whip crack. I can do whatever I please. You will accept a draft from my bank tomorrow morning, and in exchange, you will hand over the promissory note. Now. And why would you do this? Holloway spat, his face turning purple. For a destitute girl? Sebastian looked down at Michael. For a second, the coldness in his eyes vanished, replaced by a heat that made her knees weak. It was acting, she knew. It had to be acting. But it felt terrifyingly real. Because, Sebastian said loud enough for the entire room to hear, Lady Michael has just done me the extraordinary honor of consenting to be my wife. And I do not permit my future duchess to be harassed by insects. The gasp that went through the room sucked the air out of the space. Wine glasses were lowered. Fans stopped fluttering. Holloway looked as though he had been struck. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at Michael, waiting for her to deny it. Michael lifted her chin. She channeled every ounce of pride she had left. It is true, Lord Holloway. You will have your money. And I will have my life. Sebastian offered his arm to her. Come, my dear. We have a wedding to plan." As they walked away, leaving a stunned society in their wake, Michael realized two things. First, she was safe, and second, she had just tied herself to a man who played the world like a chess game, and she had no idea if she was a player or a pawn. The wedding took place 2 weeks later. It was not the romantic affair of storybooks. It was a military operation. They were married in St. George's, Hanover Square. The pews were packed. Everyone who was anyone in London had come, mostly to see if the wolf would actually go through with it. The gossip rags had gone wild. The pauper and the prince, they called it. The baron's bargain. Michael wore white, a dress paid for by Sebastian's steward, made of heavy satin and Belgian lace. It was beautiful, but heavy. As she walked down the aisle, her father sobbing theatrically in the front row, tears of relief that his debts were paid, she looked at the altar. Sebastian stood there, rigid as a statue. He wore his formal ducal sash. He looked magnificent and terrifying. When he turned to watch her approach, his face was a mask. There was no smile, no reassurance, just duty. They exchanged vows. His voice was steady. Hers trembled only once. When the priest said, "You may kiss the bride," Sebastian leaned in. Michael braced herself. She expected a peck on the cheek. Instead, his hands came up to cup her face, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones. He tilted her head back and kissed her mouth. It wasn't the ravishing kiss of the ballroom hand kiss. It was chaste, firm, and possessive. But for a split second, before he pulled away, Michael felt a tremor in his hands. He is afraid, she realized with a jolt. The wolf is afraid. But the moment passed, and the mask slammed back down. The reception was a blur of congratulations from people who had shunned her 2 weeks ago. Then came the carriage ride. They were leaving immediately for Blackwood Hall in Northumberland. The journey would take 2 days by train and carriage. As the carriage rattled over the cobblestones of London, leaving the city behind, silence filled the small space. Sebastian immediately opened a portfolio of papers and began reading, ignoring her completely. Michael watched him for a mile. Finally, she couldn't take it. "Is this how it is to be, Sebastian?" she asked. Silence. He didn't look up. "We have a long journey, Michael. I have business to attend to. You have scenery to admire." "We are married," she said, frustration bubbling up. "You could at least pretend to like me when there is no audience." He looked up then, closing the portfolio with a snap. "I like you fine, Michael. You are intelligent and quiet. Keep being those things." "I am not a piece of furniture." "No," he said darkly. "Furniture is easily replaced. A duchess is not. Do not push for intimacy where there is none, Michael. It will only make this year harder for you." He went back to his papers. Michael turned to the window, watching the rain streak the glass. She felt a cold knot of dread in her stomach. She had escaped Holloway's fire, but she had jumped straight into an iceberg. The arrival Blackwood Hall was a monster of stone. It sat on a cliff edge, overlooking a churning grey sea. Turrets stabbed the sky, and gargoyles leered down from the eaves. It was beautiful in a Gothic, haunting way, but it felt utterly desolate. The staff were lined up in the draughty entrance hall. They looked terrified, not respectful. Terrified. "Welcome home, Your Grace." The butler, a man named Mr. Finch, who looked like he was carved from granite, intoned. "Finch," Sebastian acknowledged, handing him his coat. "This is Her Grace. She is to be obeyed as you obey me. Is that clear?" "Crystal clear, Your Grace." "Good. Prepare the blue suite for Her Grace. I will be in the West Wing, as usual." Michael froze. "Separate wings?" Sebastian turned to her, his face weary. "I told you, Michael. Separate lives. The blue suite is the finest in the house. It faces the gardens. You will be comfortable there." "And where is the west wing?" "On the cliff side," he said. "And you are not to go there." "Why?" "Because," his voice hardened, "it is my private sanctuary. And because the floorboards are rotten, it is unsafe." It was a lie. She could see it in his eyes. "Supper is at 8, he said, turning his back on her. "Do not be late." That night, Michael dined alone at one end of a table long enough to seat 30 people. Sebastian sat at the other end, reading a newspaper. The only sound was the clinking of silverware and the howling of the wind outside. When she went to bed in the blue suite, which was indeed luxurious, with a roaring fire and silk sheets, she couldn't sleep. The house groaned. Around 2 a.m., she heard it. It was a scream, muffled, distant, but undeniable. It sounded like a man in agony. Michael sat up, her heart pounding. She lit a candle and went into the hallway. The corridor was empty, shadows dancing on the tapestries. The sound came again. It was coming from the west wing. The rotten floorboards. She knew she should go back to bed. She knew the rules. But Michael Vance had not survived poverty, and Holloway to be cowed by a locked door. She walked barefoot down the cold stone corridor, towards the heavy oak doors that separated the wings. They were unlocked. She pushed them open. The air here was colder. The dust was thicker. She followed the sound. It led her to a door at the very end of the hall. Light flickered from underneath it. She put her hand on the knob. "No, get out! Get out of my head!" It was Sebastian's voice. He was screaming. Michael threw the door open. The room was a wreck. A chair was overturned. Books were scattered on the floor. In the center of the room, Sebastian was thrashing on a small cot, tangled in sheets, sweat pouring down his face. He was asleep, trapped in a nightmare so vivid it was physical. "Sebastian!" she cried, rushing to him. She grabbed his shoulders. He was burning up. "Sebastian, wake up!" His eyes flew open, but they didn't see her. They were wide, dilated, full of terror. "They're coming!" he gasped, grabbing her wrists with bruising force. "The water, the ice. Julian, don't let them." "Sebastian, it's me. It's Michael." He blinked. Slowly the madness faded from his eyes, replaced by recognition, and then, instantly, by horror. He shoved her away, scrambling backward against the headboard. He was shirtless, his chest heaving, covered in scars, long, jagged white lines that looked like claw marks. "I told you," he snarled, his voice shaking, "never to come here." "You were screaming," Michael said, standing her ground though she was trembling. "You were in pain." "I am always in pain," he roared. "Get out." "No." The word hung in the air. Sebastian looked stunned. No one said no to him. "I am your wife," Michael said, her voice gaining strength. "Fake or not, I am the only person in this house who isn't paid to fear you. I am not leaving you in the dark." She reached out and picked up a glass of water from the nightstand. She held it out to him. Sebastian looked at the water, then at her. The wolf looked like a kicked dog. "You don't know what you've done," he whispered, his voice broken. "You don't know what runs in my blood, Michael. You should run. Run while you still can." "I'm done running," she said softly. She sat on the edge of the bed. "Drink." For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, with a shaking hand, he took the glass. Their fingers brushed. The spark was there again, that strange electric connection that defied their contract. He drank. Then he looked at her, exhausted. "My brother didn't die in a duel," he whispered. It was a confession in the dark. He went mad, like my father. He tried to kill me. I had to stop him." Michael's hand covered his. "That is not madness, Sebastian. That is tragedy. It is the same thing in this family," he said bitterly. He looked at her hand on his. He didn't pull away. "Go back to your room, Michael," he said, but his voice was gentle now. "Please, before I forget that I am a gentleman." Michael stood up. She blew out the candle by his bed, leaving only the moonlight. "Good night, Sebastian," she said. She walked to the door. "Michael?" She turned. "Thank you," he said. She closed the door. She leaned against it, her heart racing. The contract was simple. 1 year, no emotions, just business. But as she stood in the dark hallway, Michael knew that clause was already broken. She wasn't just fighting for her future anymore. She was going to fight for his. 3 months passed. The winter snows buried Northumberland in white, isolating Blackwood Hall from the world. But inside, the temperature was slowly, agonizingly thawing. It wasn't a romance. It was a truce. Sebastian no longer hid in the West Wing every night. He joined her for dinner. They played chess by the fire. He discovered she had a wicked sense of humor and a sharp mind for politics. She discovered that he was a brilliant architect who designed cottages for his tenants to ensure they were warm in the winter. He wasn't the monster the world thought he was. He was a man crushed by the weight of a cursed legacy. But peace is fragile. One morning in March, the sound of carriage wheels crunching on gravel shattered their routine. Michael was in the greenhouse, tending to the orchids when Finch appeared, looking pale. "Your Grace," he said. "Visitors?" "Who is it?" Michael asked, wiping dirt from her hands. "Lord Julian Thorne," Finch said, "and Lady Cecilia Vane." Michael's blood went cold. Julian, the cousin who wanted the title, and Cecilia, the woman society had always assumed Sebastian would marry, a striking, raven-haired beauty who had been Sebastian's mistress years ago. Michael walked into the drawing room. Sebastian was already there, standing by the fireplace, his posture rigid. Julian Thorne was a slimmer, prettier version of Sebastian. He had the same grey eyes, but where Sebastian's were stormy, Julian's were glassy and cruel. Lady Cecilia was draped on the sofa, looking like a poisonous flower in purple velvet. "Cousin," Julian exclaimed, standing up, "and the new Duchess. How quaint." "What do you want, Julian?" Sebastian asked, his voice low. "We came to check on you, of course." Julian smiled. "Rumours in London are so dreary. They say you've locked yourself away again. They say the madness is setting in." "As you can see," Michael said, stepping forward, her voice crisp, "my husband is perfectly well. Better than well." Julian turned his gaze to her. It felt like a slimy touch. "Ah, the purchased bride. How is the debt, Lady Michael? Fully paid?" "Julian," Sebastian warned, stepping between them. "We are here for the spring hunt," Cecilia interrupted, her voice like honey laced with arsenic. She looked at Sebastian with hungry eyes. "You always host it, darling. It would be a shame to break tradition. Unless you aren't up to it." It was a trap. If Sebastian refused, they would claim he was reclusive and unstable. If he agreed, he would have to endure days of scrutiny, drinking and provocation designed to make him snap. Sebastian looked at Michael. He was ready to refuse, to throw them out and damn the consequences. But Michael smiled, a cold society smile she had learned from the very people who used to mock her. "We would be delighted," Michael said. "In fact, we were just discussing it. We shall fill the house. Let all of London come and see the Duke of Blackwood in his prime." Sebastian looked at her, surprised. "Excellent." Julian clapped his hands. "I shall send word. Oh, and Sebastian, try not to have any episodes. It would be so embarrassing for your new acquisition." As they left the room to be shown to their chambers, Sebastian turned to Michael. "What have you done?" he hissed. "I cannot handle a house full of people. They are coming to watch me fail. Julian will provoke me until I strike him, and then he will have his proof." Michael stepped close to him. She reached up and straightened his lapel. "Let them come, Sebastian," she said fiercely. "Let them come and see." "See what?" "See that you are not alone," she said. "Julian thinks you are the isolated, broken man he remembers. He doesn't know you have an ally. We are going to beat him at his own game. We are going to be the perfect couple. We are going to be untouchable." Sebastian stared at her. The fear in his eyes warred with something else. Hope. "You are playing a dangerous game, Michael." "I know," she whispered, "but I have the best partner in England." He didn't pull away. He leaned his forehead against hers. It was a moment of utter vulnerability. "Do not let me fall," he whispered. "Never," she vowed. But neither of them noticed the maid standing in the doorway, listening. The maid who had been paid by Julian Thorne to slip a vial of laudanum into the Duke's wine decanter before the hunt began. The trap was set. The players were on the board, and the hunt was about to begin. The grand hall of Blackwood shuddered under the weight of judgment. 50 guests, the cream of London society and the cruelest gossips in England, sat at the long mahogany table. Crystal glittered, silver sparked, but the air was thick with tension. Sebastian sat at the head of the table, Michael at the foot. Between them lay an expanse of white linen and the prying eyes of their enemies. Julian Thorne sat to Sebastian's right, his smile as sharp as the steak knife in his hand. Lady Cecilia sat opposite him, her laughter tinkling like breaking glass. They were performing, and they expected Sebastian to crack. "A toast," Julian announced, standing up and raising his goblet. The ruby wine caught the candlelight. "To the Duke of Blackwood. It warms my heart to see him. Stable. We all remember the dark days, don't we? The shouting, the violence." A murmur went through the room. It was a direct insult, thinly veiled as concern. Sebastian didn't flinch. His hand was wrapped around the stem of his wine glass. "The past is a country I no longer visit, Julian. I prefer the present." "Do you?" Julian smirked. "And yet they say madness is in the blood, like a rot. Tell me, cousin, do you still see him? Your brother? Do you see the ghost?" Sebastian's knuckles turned white. Michael watched him from down the table. She saw the tick in his jaw. She saw the way his eyes dilated. And then she saw something else. The maid, a young girl named Sarah, who had been trembling all evening, was refilling Sebastian's water glass. Her hand shook so violently that a few drops splashed onto the tablecloth. As she pulled away, she exchanged a terrified, fleeting glance with Julian. Michael's instincts, honed by years of surviving her father's gambling debts, screamed a warning. It wasn't just provocation. It was sabotage. Sebastian raised the glass to his lips. "Sebastian, wait!" Michael's voice rang out, sharp and commanding. Every head turned. Sebastian froze, the glass inches from his mouth. Michael stood up. She needed a distraction. She needed to get that glass away from him without causing a scene that would confirm his instability. "A toast of my own," she said, walking steadily toward him. Her emerald gown trailed behind her like a royal train. "To family, and to the loyalty that binds us." She reached Sebastian's side. She placed her hand over his, covering the glass. Her fingers were ice cold. She looked into his eyes, pouring every ounce of her will into him. "Do not drink it," she begged silently. "Michael," he murmured. He looked pale. Sweat was already beading on his forehead. He had already drunk the wine earlier. The drug, whatever it was starting to work. "You look warm, my love," she said, loud enough for the table to hear. She deliberately knocked the glass from his hand. It shattered against the stone floor. The sound was like a gunshot. "Oh, how clumsy of me," Michael exclaimed, her voice light but her eyes deadly serious. She gripped Sebastian's shoulder. "The heat in here is stifling. Come, Sebastian. Walk me to the terrace. I feel faint." "He looks like he's seeing demons," Julian sneered, leaning in. "Look at his eyes. He's losing it." Sebastian swayed. The room was spinning. The faces of the guests were warping, turning into grotesque masks. He looked at Julian and saw not his cousin, but his dead brother. Blood pouring from his chest. "Kill him," the voice in his head whispered. "Kill the threat." Sebastian's hand moved toward the knife on the table. Michael saw it. She grabbed his face with both hands, forcing him to look at her. "Sebastian!" she whispered fiercely. "Look at me. Only me. I am real. The rest is a lie. Look at the green of my dress. Look at me." Sebastian blinked. The red haze receded for a second. He saw Michael's blue eyes anchoring him to the earth. "Michael," he choked out. "Take me outside," she ordered. "Now." Using her body to shield him, she guided the hulking Duke out of the room. He was leaning heavily on her, his breathing ragged. As they exited, she heard Julian's laugh. "It begins," Julian whispered to Cecilia. "By morning, he will be in Bedlam Asylum, and Blackwood will be mine." Michael didn't take him to the terrace. She took him straight to the stables. The cold night air hit them. Sebastian fell to his knees in the straw, retching. "Poison," he gasped. "Laudanum. And something else. Datura." "I know," Michael said, grabbing a bucket of water and splashing it over his face. "Julian wants you to break. He wants you to attack him so he can commit you." I have to leave," Sebastian stammered, trying to stand. "If I stay, I will kill him, and then I am lost." "No," Michael said. She grabbed his lapels. "If you run, you prove him right. If you hide, you prove him right." "I cannot trust my mind, Michael. I see them. I see the dead." He roared the words, his voice cracking with despair. "Then trust my mind," she screamed back. "I will be your eyes. I will be your sanity. But we are not running." She turned to the stable boy, who was watching with wide eyes. "Saddle 2 horses. The black stallion for the Duke. The mare for me." "My lady," the boy stuttered. "It's midnight. The cliffs." "Do it." 10 minutes later, they were riding out into the darkness. The wind whipped Michael's hair, tearing the pins loose. She rode beside Sebastian, watching him. He was fighting a war within himself, his hands gripping the reins so hard the leather creaked. They rode to the high point, the cliffs overlooking the North Sea. It was a desolate, dangerous place, the perfect place for a confrontation. "Why are we here?" Sebastian shouted over the wind. "Because the cold clears the head," she shouted back. "And because Julian will follow." She was right. Not 20 minutes later, the sound of hooves thundered behind them. Julian arrived, accompanied by 3 of his cronies, witnesses. Julian pulled his horse up. He looked triumphant. "Running away to jump, cousin?" Julian yelled. "It's poetic, just like father." Sebastian turned his horse. He looked at Julian. The hallucinations were screaming at him. The waves below sounded like voices. The urge to drive his horse over the edge, to end the noise, was overwhelming. "Do it, Sebastian," Julian goaded, stepping off his horse. "End the misery. You're broken. You're a monster. You bought a wife because no one could love you. Look at her. She's terrified of you." Sebastian looked at Michael. Michael sat tall on her mare. She didn't look terrified. She looked furious. She reached into her saddlebag. She didn't pull out a weapon. She pulled out a small, leather-bound book. "You are right, Julian," Michael yelled, her voice cutting through the wind. "He is a monster of business." She threw the book at Julian's feet. "What is this?" Julian sneered. "That," Michael said, "is the ledger I found in your chambers while you were dressing for dinner. The ledger that shows you have been embezzling from the family trust for 10 years. The ledger that shows payments to a certain apothecary for herbal extracts, identical to the ones found in the Duke's wine tonight." The cronies shifted uncomfortably. This was not the madness they were promised. This was a felony. "You lie!" Julian shrieked. "And," Michael continued, pointing a gloved finger at the darkness of the tree line, "I brought a witness." From the shadows, Finch the butler emerged, holding the arm of Sarah, the weeping maid. "She confessed, Julian," Michael said calmly. "She told us how you threatened her family if she didn't dose the wine." Julian's face crumpled. The mask of the concerned cousin vanished, replaced by the snarl of a cornered rat. He lunged for the pistol in his belt. "I'll kill you both!" Bang! The shot echoed across the cliffs, but it didn't come from Julian. It came from Sebastian. He held a smoking pistol in his hand. He had drawn it with a speed that defied his drugged state. He hadn't shot Julian. He had shot the ground, inches from Julian's boot. The dirt exploded, sending Julian scrambling back, falling into the mud. Sebastian rode his horse forward. The mad Duke was gone. The wolf had returned. He looked down at his cousin. "That was a warning, Julian. The next one won't miss." He turned to the witnesses. "Take him. Get him off my land. If I see him again, I will not need a trial. I will execute him as a trespasser." The cronies didn't hesitate. They grabbed a sobbing Julian and dragged him away. Silence returned to the cliffs. The adrenaline faded, and Sebastian slumped forward on his horse's neck. Michael was beside him in an instant. She pulled him from the saddle just as he lost consciousness. They collapsed onto the grass together, the roar of the ocean below them. "You stayed," Sebastian whispered, his eyes closing. "Why did you stay?" Michael brushed the dark hair from his forehead. She kissed his temple. "Because," she whispered, "I found something worth fighting for." Sebastian slept for 2 days. The fever from the drug burned itself out, leaving him weak but clear-minded for the first time in years. When he woke, the room was filled with light. The heavy velvet curtains were pulled back. The windows were open, letting in the scent of the sea and the spring flowers. He tried to sit up. "Careful," a soft voice said. Michael was sitting in the armchair by the window. She wasn't wearing the stiff silks of a duchess. She was wearing a simple morning dress, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked younger, softer. "Julian?" Sebastian asked, his voice rasping. "Gone," Michael said, pouring him a cup of tea. "He is on a ship to Australia. The police were persuaded that exile was better than a public hanging. The scandal would have been tiresome." Sebastian took the tea. His hands were steady. "And the society? The rumors. They are saying you are a hero." Michael smiled wryly. "They say you uncovered a corruption plot and defended your wife's honor on the cliffs. You are the toast of London, Sebastian." He looked at her. He really looked at her. The woman who had stood between him and the abyss. The woman who had lied, schemed, and fought for him when he couldn't fight for himself. "The year is not up," Sebastian said quietly. Michael's smile faded slightly. "No. We have 8 months left on the contract." "Where is it?" "The contract?" "Yes." Michael went to the desk and pulled out the heavy parchment. She brought it to him. Sebastian took it. He looked at the signatures. "Michael Vance, Sebastian Thorne, a business arrangement, a sale. He tore it in half, then he tore the halves into quarters. Michael watched him, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Sebastian? What are you doing?" "I am voiding the terms," he said. "I do not want a business partner, Michael. I do not want a fake wife." He tossed the scraps of paper onto the floor. He reached out and took her hand, the hand he had kissed in the ballroom that first night. "I want the woman who ran into the dark to save me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I want the woman who faced down a loaded gun for me. I love you, Michael. I have loved you since the moment you looked at me in that ballroom and didn't flinch." Tears spilled over Michael's lashes. She had been so strong for so long. She finally let herself be soft. "I thought I was just a shield to you," she whispered. "You were never a shield." He pulled her down onto the bed, wrapping his arms around her, burying his face in her neck. "You were the only thing that was real." He kissed her then, not for a crowd, not for a show, but for them. It was a kiss of gratitude, of passion, and of a promise kept. "Stay with me," he murmured against her lips. "Not for a year, forever." "Forever," she agreed. 1 year later, the Ashbourne Ball was once again the highlight of the season. The ballroom was crowded, the music loud. At the top of the grand staircase, the herald struck his staff. Her Grace, the Duchess of Blackwood, and His Grace, the Duke. Sebastian and Michael appeared. She was wearing emerald green again. But this time, there were diamonds at her throat. Diamonds that belonged to the Blackwood family vault. Sebastian looked formidable, but the coldness was gone from his eyes. He held his wife's hand, his thumb stroking her knuckles absent-mindedly. As they descended the stairs, people bowed, not out of fear, but out of respect. They were the golden couple, the power of the North. "They are looking at us," Sebastian whispered in her ear. "Let them look," Michael whispered back, squeezing his hand. "Let them see what winning looks like." They stepped onto the floor. The music started. It was a waltz. "Dance with me, Michael," Sebastian said, his eyes full of love. "Always, my wolf," she replied. And as they spun into the center of the room, the world faded away, leaving only the girl who had been saved, and the monster she had learned to love. And so, Lady Michael Vance did not disappear into the fog that night. Instead, she stepped out of the shadows and into the legend of the Blackwood Duchy. What began as a desperate bargain to escape ruin became a love story that defied madness, greed, and society itself. It reminds us that sometimes the scariest choices lead to the most beautiful destinations, and that even the coldest hearts can be thawed by the right fire. Michael and Sebastian proved that love isn't just a feeling. It's a battle you fight together. What did you think of Michael's bravery? Would you have ridden to the cliffs to save the Duke? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story moved you, please give this video a like and share it with a friend who loves a good historical romance. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a story. We have a heartbreaking saga about a forbidden prince coming up next week that you won't want to miss. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next story.